The story begins not with a discovery, but with a memory older than any written word, older even than the pyramids or the temples that still rise from the earth. It is the memory of a flood, of water swallowing land, of light disappearing beneath the sea. Every civilization tells it differently, yet everyone tells it the same. The Mesopotamians spoke of a storm sent by the gods to cleanse the world. The Hebrews called it the Great Deluge. The Greeks called it the wrath of Poseidon. But the most enduring of all these stories is the one told by a philosopher in ancient Athens, the story of a city that sank overnight. In the 4th century before Christ, the philosopher Plato sat with his students and spoke of a mighty civilization that had once ruled the seas. It was called Atlantis, he said, a land of astonishing beauty and power, where great temples of gold and orichalcum gleamed in the sunlight and canals carried ships through its capital like veins of silver. Atlantis, according to Plato, lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, and its empire stretched across the known world. But then, in a single day and night of misfortune, the island was swallowed by the sea and vanished from the face of the earth. For centuries, scholars have argued about what Plato meant. Was Atlantis real, or was it a parable, a moral story about pride, greed, and the fall of nations? The philosopher himself claimed the story came from Solon, the legendary lawgiver of Athens, who had heard it from Egyptian priests during his travels. The priests, he said, told of an ancient war between their civilization and a powerful island people from the west who perished when the gods drowned their cities. But Solon never finished translating the tale, and when Plato retold it, it became less a record and more a myth, a story so vivid that it refused to die. Over the centuries, explorers, dreamers, and historians have searched for Atlantis in every corner of the world. Some placed it in the Caribbean, among the coral ruins of the Bahamas. Others said it lay beneath the sands of the Sahara, where the wind hides circular structures that once might have been ports. Still others believe it lies deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, its remains buried under miles of sediment and volcanic rock. But perhaps the truth of Atlantis is not in a single place, but in a memory shared across civilizations. The echo of a disaster so vast that it left its mark on humanity itself. Long before written history, at the end of the last ice age, the world was changing. Glaciers that had covered continents began to melt and sea levels rose hundreds of feet. Islands disappeared, coastlines retreated, and entire landscapes vanished beneath the ocean. To the people who lived through it, the world must have seemed to end. Vast plains that once connected lands became seabeds. Rivers became bays. What had been home was gone forever. And those who survived carried the memory of it in their stories. A flood that swept away the old world. Archaeologists and geologists now know that around 12,000 years ago, the Earth experienced a period of violent transformation. The Younger Dryas, as scientists call it, brought sudden cold, chaos, and floods of unimaginable scale. Massive walls of ice collapsed, releasing torrents that reshaped entire continents. It was around this same time, according to Plato's own chronology, that Atlantis fell. He placed its destruction at around 9600 BC, precisely the era when the world's climate shifted and oceans rose. Whether coincidence or memory, the alignment is too perfect to ignore. In the ruins of forgotten cities, the flood is still remembered. In Mesopotamia, the ancient tablets of Gilgamesh tell of a man who built a great boat to survive the gods' punishment. In India, ancient texts speak of Manu, the first man, warned by a divine fish to build an ark before the waters came. In Central America, the Maya told of 4 previous worlds destroyed by water and fire. Across thousands of years and thousands of miles, the story is always the same: a great flood, a handful of survivors, and the rebirth of the world. It may be that Atlantis was never meant to describe a single city, but the collective memory of vanished age, a time when civilization itself was young and fragile, and when nature reminded humanity of its smallness. Perhaps Plato's tale was the final echo of a truth already ancient when he told it, a story carried from one civilization to another until it became myth. But myth is never just imagination. Myths endure because they carry something real within them, a seed of truth hidden beneath the poetry. And when the truth is old enough, it ceases to be a story and becomes something else entirely, a riddle left by time. Beneath the surface of Plato's tale, beneath the flood myths of Sumer, Egypt, and the Andes, lies a pattern, one that suggests something extraordinary. That before the world we know, there may have been another, and that it did not fade away slowly, but vanished in a single night of catastrophe. In the modern age, scientists have begun to look for the source of that memory, not in myth, but in the earth itself. In the depths of the Black Sea, divers have found the remains of ancient coastlines now submerged under hundreds of feet of water. In the Mediterranean, sonar reveals the outlines of drowned settlements, their stone foundations preserved beneath silt. Off the coast of India, in the Bay of Cambay, explorers discovered what may be the remnants of a lost city, 10,000 years old, lying under the waves. The deeper they search, the more they find evidence of worlds that once existed where now there is only sea. Perhaps Atlantis was not one city, but many, not one fall, but countless. A memory of the moment when the earth shifted, when humanity's cradle was washed clean, and the survivors began again. It is in this idea that Plato's words find their greatest power, not as a warning of arrogance or divine punishment, but as the recollection of a civilization that vanished beneath the tide, leaving only silence and myth behind. And so, the question remains, what really happened 12,000 years ago? What force could raise entire lands in a single night? Was it the wrath of the gods, or something far more tangible, the earth itself awakening? To answer that, we must go back to the moment when the ice began to melt, when the seas rose faster than man could flee, and when the memory of Atlantis was born. The earth remembers in silence. Beneath the shifting continents and restless seas, layers of silt and stone hold the record of what once was. For generations, myths told of floods that destroyed the world, but only in recent decades have we begun to uncover their physical traces. Proof that the flood was not imagination, but memory. It began in the depths of the Black Sea. For centuries, it was thought to have always been a saltwater basin, but in the 1990s, oceanographers discovered something astonishing. Beneath its surface lay a layer of ancient freshwater sediments, evidence that thousands of years ago the Black Sea had been a vast inland lake surrounded by fertile plains. Then, around 7,600 years ago, the Mediterranean broke through the Bosporus Strait and seawater roared in with the force of 1,000 rivers. The flood would have drowned an area the size of modern England in a matter of months. Villages, forests, and farmland vanished beneath the rising tide. For those who lived there, It must have seemed like the world was ending. The sea would have crept higher every day, swallowing the land, pushing people inland, until there was nowhere left to go. The memory of that event could have endured in stories told around campfires, whispered by survivors as they migrated to safer ground. And perhaps, over generations, those stories became the legends of floods sent by the gods, or of islands that disappeared beneath the waves. Farther south in the Aegean and Mediterranean, archaeologists have found evidence of similar cataclysms. Entire settlements now lie underwater along the coast of Greece, Italy, and Turkey. In places like Petri, a submerged city off the coast of southern Laconia, streets, houses, and courtyards remain preserved under 10 feet of water, a snapshot of life frozen thousands of years ago. Carbon dating suggests it was already ancient by the time of the earliest pyramids. The sea took it suddenly, with no sign of battle or fire, only silence. Somewhere beyond Crete lies another mystery, the island of Santorini, known in ancient times as Thera. Around 1600 BC, it was home to one of the most advanced civilizations of the Bronze Age, the Minoans. Their cities glistened with art and engineering unmatched in their time. But then came the eruption. In a single apocalyptic moment, the volcano beneath the island exploded with the force of hundreds of atomic bombs. Ash blotted out the sun. Tidal waves struck Crete with walls of water 100 feet high. The Minoan world crumbled, and much of it sank beneath the sea. For centuries after, Greek sailors told tales of islands that burned and vanished, of gods who punished pride with fire and water. Some believe it was this memory, carried from Thera to the mainland, that became Plato's story of Atlantis, a powerful civilization, destroyed overnight, swallowed by the sea for its arrogance. Whether coincidence or connection, the parallels are undeniable. But the story of the flood is not limited to the Mediterranean. Across the world, ancient peoples describe the same terror. In the Indian subcontinent, cities like Dwarka are said to have once stood along the coast before being consumed by the ocean. Divers exploring the Gulf of Khamhat discovered geometric stone structures and artifacts buried beneath layers of sediment, suggesting that a great civilization once thrived there before being lost to the rising sea. The people of India still tell of Lord Krishna's city, shining with gold, that vanished into the waves, a myth perhaps born from that same global event. Even farther east, in what is now Indonesia, scientists have mapped massive undersea plateaus once above water during the Ice Age. Sunderland, they call it, a drowned continent that stretched across Southeast Asia, now fragmented into thousands of islands. Its people, displaced by rising seas, may have carried their memories of the flood northward and westward, spreading stories of destruction and rebirth that reached as far as Egypt and Greece. It is here that myth and science begin to merge. Around 12,000 years ago, the world truly did change overnight. The melting of the great northern ice sheets sent torrents of fresh water surging into the oceans. Sea levels rose hundreds of feet in only a few generations. Entire coastlines disappeared. The flood myths that echo through every culture may all trace back to this moment, the end of the last ice age, when the earth itself seemed to rebel. For the survivors, the sea was not merely a natural force, it was divine, alive, unpredictable. To them, the flood was a punishment and a cleansing, a memory of the gods remaking the world. The survivors rebuilt, their cities rising farther inland, their stories carrying the warning forward. And when those stories were finally written down, on clay, on papyrus, on stone, they became sacred. Plato's Atlantis may have been one of those memories, retold in a philosopher's words after millennia of transformation. Perhaps his ancestors, or the ancestors of the Egyptians he quoted, had lived through the final moments of the flood. To them, the lost island would not have been fantasy, it would have been history. But if that is true, then Atlantis is not gone. It lies everywhere the sea hides ruins. Every submerged temple, every drowned valley, every city reclaimed by coral may be a fragment of that ancient memory, pieces of the world before the flood. And each discovery brings us closer to understanding what really happened when the sea rose and the earth remade itself. In every age, humanity has looked to the horizon, wondering what lies beyond. But perhaps the greater mystery lies beneath, in the silent depths where light cannot reach, and where the ghosts of the old world still sleep. The question is not whether Atlantis existed, but how many Atlantean worlds have come and gone since the dawn of time, and how many more may yet sink beneath the waves when the earth decides to begin again. For centuries, the search for Atlantis has been less about geography and more about faith. Faith that the world once held a secret too grand to be forgotten. Faith that somewhere beneath the waves, the ruins of that lost age still wait. From the moment Plato's words were translated into Latin and spread through Europe, explorers began to dream of finding the city that vanished overnight. They searched deserts, jungles, and seas, chasing fragments of memory that seemed to call from the deep. Each generation had its believers. In the 15th century, as Columbus sailed westward, he carried with him maps that hinted at lands swallowed by the sea. When he reached the islands of the Caribbean, he wrote of strange stone ruins and ancient stories told by the natives, of ancestors who had fled a sunken homeland to the east. To some, this was proof that the Atlanteans had survived and settled in the New World. The legend took root again, reborn in another land. In the modern era, technology replaced myth with sonar and satellites, but the dream remained the same. In 1968, a group of divers off the coast of Bimini in the Bahamas stumbled upon what appeared to be a massive stone structure on the seafloor. The slabs were perfectly rectangular, laid end to end, like a road stretching into the blue. It became known as the Bimini Road. Some believed it was the remains of an Atlantean harbor, a pier or causeway leading to a city long lost. Others insisted it was a natural formation, limestone shaped by waves and time. Yet even now, under certain light, the stones seem too perfect, too deliberate, as if someone had carved order into the chaos of the sea. The Caribbean, with its clear waters and ancient myths, remains one of the most popular candidates for Atlantis. Beneath the islands of Cuba, sonar has revealed geometric patterns, vast grids of shapes too symmetrical to be random. Explorers have spoken of pyramid-like structures and roads etched into the seabed, resting far deeper than any human settlement should. The Cuban government has largely restricted access to the site, leaving the mystery unresolved, sealed beneath 1,000 feet of saltwater silence. Far across the Atlantic, on the edge of the Sahara Desert, lies another possible clue, a vast circular formation known as the Rishat structure, or the Eye of the Sahara. From space, it looks like a great ripple frozen in stone, 3 concentric rings of rock perfectly aligned. When explorers first saw it, They thought it might be an impact crater. But the geology tells another story: erosion, wind, and time, not cosmic collision. And yet, the shape mirrors exactly how Plato described the capital of Atlantis: a city of rings surrounded by water and land, connected by bridges and canals. Could this barren desert once have been the sea? Could the eye of the Sahara be the ghost of Atlantis itself, buried beneath the sands of Mauritania after an ancient flood turned ocean into desert? Scientists are cautious, but the questions remain. The Sahara was not always dry. Thousands of years ago, it was green, filled with lakes, rivers, and forests. Fossilized fish and shells still lie scattered across the dunes, reminders of a time when the sea reached far inland. If the climate could change so dramatically once, could it not have drowned an entire civilization? The line between land and sea is fragile, and history has erased greater empires before. Yet perhaps the most compelling evidence lies not in Africa or the Americas, but in the Mediterranean itself, in the ruins beneath the waves near Spain, Malta, and Crete. In 2009, archaeologists mapping the seafloor near Cadiz found massive rectangular foundations buried under sand, aligned along ancient coastlines that existed before the end of the Ice Age. The structures resembled walls, roads, even towers. To some, it was confirmation that Plato's "beyond the pillars of Heracles" referred not to a mythical island across the ocean, but to lands now underwater near the Iberian coast. In Malta, a network of mysterious stone temples stands weathered by wind and salt, older than Stonehenge, older even than the pyramids. Beneath them, tunnels stretch toward the sea, filled with silence and legend. Locals still tell of the halls of the giants, where the ancients stored knowledge before the waters came. Some believe these temples were built by survivors, the last echo of a world that drowned, trying to preserve what they remembered of it. The search for Atlantis has always been more than archaeology. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's longing for origins. Every time we find a ruin beneath the sea, we glimpse not just lost stone, but lost identity, the story of who we were before the flood. Even now, in the age of satellites, the ocean hides more than it reveals. More than 80% of the seafloor remains unexplored. Entire mountain ranges, valleys, and plateaus lie untouched, their shapes hidden under miles of water. Somewhere among them could lie the remains of that vanished civilization, or perhaps the bones of many. The idea of Atlantis endures not because it is fantasy, but because it feels like truth. The ancients remembered something, something catastrophic, something that changed the face of the earth and forced humanity to begin again. Every submerged ruin, every temple reclaimed by coral may be another chapter of that forgotten story. Atlantis may not have been one city, one people, or one place, but the memory of all that humanity lost when the world drowned. And yet, if Atlantis truly existed, its people were not entirely lost. Their story survived, carved into stone, whispered in myth, woven into the histories of those who came after. Their knowledge may have seeded the birth of later civilizations: Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley. It is said that the gods taught humanity the arts of building, astronomy, and law. But perhaps those gods were only the survivors of an earlier age, the remnants of a people who remembered what the flood had erased. If the world before the flood truly existed, then its people did not vanish entirely. Fragments of their knowledge seem to have survived, carried by those who escaped the deluge and began anew. Across the world, civilizations that appeared suddenly and inexplicably advanced left behind clues: perfect architecture, mathematics, astronomy, and myths that speak of teachers who came from the sea after the world had drowned. In Egypt, the ancient priests told Herodotus that their kingdom was not the first, but the latest in a long succession of civilizations destroyed by floods and fire. They said the gods once lived among men, ruling from a golden age before chaos swept the land. When order returned, survivors rebuilt under divine guidance. The oldest temples in Egypt, those at Abydos and Edfu, speak of this forgotten age. On their walls are carvings describing the followers of Horus, divine beings who arrived after a catastrophe to rebuild the world of men. They taught writing, agriculture, and the building of stone temples, skills too advanced to appear from nothing. The same story repeats in Sumer, the cradle of Mesopotamian civilization. There, ancient tablets describe how the kingship descended from heaven after the flood. The Sumerians claimed their gods came from the sea, bringing with them knowledge of astronomy, timekeeping, and sacred geometry. The fish god Oannes, half man and half fish, is said to have emerged from the waters each morning to teach humanity and return to the depths each night. To the people of that time, he was divine, but perhaps he was simply a survivor from an older world, one whose city had vanished beneath the waves. Far to the west, the Mayans and Aztecs of the Americas told similar tales. They spoke of white-bearded teachers who arrived after the waters receded, bringing tools, laws, and the gift of building in stone. The Inca called him Viracocha, the Maya knew him as Kukulkan, and the Aztecs called him Quetzalcoatl. He came from the east, they said, across the ocean after a great flood destroyed the world. He built cities, taught humanity, and promised to return. The parallels are too precise, too global to be dismissed as coincidence. It seems that wherever civilization reappeared, it came suddenly, as if guided by memory. One moment the world was scattered tribes and nomads, the next it was building cities aligned to the stars, mapping constellations, and charting time. Archaeologists call it a sudden leap, but myth calls it something else: remembrance. The survivors of the last world rebuilding what they could recall of the one that came before. This sudden burst of knowledge appears first around the same time everywhere, between 10 and 5,000 years ago. In Mesopotamia, writing and irrigation. In Egypt, stone architecture. In the Indus Valley, urban planning and sanitation. In South America, megalithic construction so precise that modern engineers still marvel at it. It is as though an invisible hand guided them. A shared spark passed from one coast to another long before history began. Many researchers have noticed the pattern. They call it the mother civilization theory. The idea that before recorded history, there existed an advanced culture whose remnants became the seeds of later empires. Its memory persisted as the legend of Atlantis. Mainstream archaeology hesitates to accept it, yet the evidence keeps surfacing. Megalithic structures older than Egypt, astronomical alignments too perfect for chance, myths describing the same sequence: catastrophe, survival, rebuilding. Even the architecture tells the same story. The step pyramids of Egypt resemble those of Central America and Indonesia, though separated by oceans and millennia. The Cyclopean masonry of Peru, vast stones cut with laser-like precision, mirrors that of ancient Turkey and the Mediterranean. The same motifs appear everywhere: serpents, suns, eyes, and spirals. It is as if all these cultures shared a common source, a memory engraved in stone. Some scientists now suspect that the knowledge of these builders might have originated with those who lived before the floods, before the earth reshaped its coasts and erased their lands. The survivors may have carried fragments of that lost science, sacred geometry, star maps, and the story of the flood itself, to the highlands where they rebuilt, and over generations, as their knowledge faded into legend, the survivors became gods in the eyes of those they taught. It is tempting to dismiss this as romantic speculation, yet every decade new discoveries push the timeline of civilization further back. The site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, uncovered in the 1990s, shocked the world. Massive stone circles perfectly carved, aligned with the heavens, built not by farmers or city dwellers, but by hunter-gatherers 12,000 years ago. It appeared from nowhere, fully formed, with no precursor. Whoever built it possessed engineering, artistic, and astronomical skill far beyond what was thought possible for that time. Then, mysteriously, they buried it by hand. Why would a people who built such monuments choose to cover them forever? Some believe they were preserving something sacred from destruction. Others say they were marking the end of an age, the final act of a civilization preparing for the flood it knew was coming. The dates of Göbekli Tepe coincide exactly with the end of the Ice Age, when rising seas and changing skies transformed the earth. If Göbekli Tepe was built by the survivors of the last world, then it is the first monument of the new one, a stone memory left for those who would follow. The first chapter in the story that would become Atlantis, Egypt, and Sumer. And if that is true, then Plato's tale was not imagination at all. It was the echo of humanity's first rebirth. We remember Atlantis not because it was perfect, but because it was lost. And every civilization since has been, in some way, an attempt to rebuild it, to reclaim what the water took away. The flood was not only the end of an age, but the beginning of memory itself. The sky has always been our oldest library. Long before words were carved into stone, before temples rose from the sand, humanity wrote its memories in the stars. When the world was young, the heavens were a map, not only of space but of time. To the ancients, the constellations were more than patterns of light. They were reminders of what had come before. Among those reminders may lie the oldest record of the flood itself. Every ancient civilization studied the stars. The Egyptians aligned their pyramids with Orion's belt and the rising of Sirius, the star that heralded the Nile's flood. The Sumerians mapped the heavens with extraordinary precision, recording eclipses thousands of years before modern astronomy. In the Andes, the Inca built temples to mirror constellations visible only from their mountain heights. What unites them all is not merely observation, but reverence. The sense that the sky preserved a truth that the earth had once lost. Some researchers believe that after the Great Flood, the survivors turned to the heavens to remember what the earth had erased. They could no longer trust the sea or the land, but the stars remained untouched, eternal. In the skies, they recorded the moment of their destruction, the tilt of the earth, the change of the seasons, the shifting of the sun's path across the horizon. These became the myths of dying suns, of gods falling from heaven, of worlds ending and beginning again. In Egypt, the constellation of Orion represented Osiris, the god of death and rebirth. The three pyramids at Giza align precisely with the stars of Orion's belt as they appeared around 10,500 BC, the exact era when the Earth's climate changed and the Ice Age ended. It is as if the builders were not honoring their present, but marking a memory from a time long gone. The same alignment appears in other parts of the world, in Mexico's Teotihuacan and in the ruins of Cambodia's Angkor Wat, both arranged to mirror the same three stars. Cultures separated by oceans, yet guided by one celestial pattern. The ancients may have used the stars as a clock, not just to tell the seasons, but to measure epochs. Through the slow wobble of the Earth's axis known as precession, the position of the stars shifts over millennia. To mark a star's former place was to mark an age. Many myths speak of the world being divided into ages or suns, each ending in catastrophe. The Greeks called them the ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. The Maya described 5 suns, the last destroyed by flood. These may be poetic reflections of the same astronomical cycles, recording the rhythm of cosmic time. Even Plato hinted that Atlantis fell during such a shift. He wrote that the island perished when the spheres of the heavens changed their course, a phrase modern translators often overlook. To ancient astronomers, this would have described precession, the turning of the heavens that marked the end of one world age and the birth of another. Perhaps Atlantis was destroyed during the transition, when the balance of sky and earth was broken. If this is true, then the builders of the first temples, in Egypt, Turkey, and beyond, were not merely honoring gods. They were calibrating memory. Every stone aligned to a star was a message to the future. This is where the sky stood when the world drowned. To read those alignments is to read the diary of the flood. In the ruins of Nabta Playa, deep in the Egyptian desert, archaeologists have found a circle of stones older than Stonehenge. It marks the rising of Sirius at the summer solstice, the same star that once signaled the annual flood of the Nile. But the placement is off by thousands of years. When the circle was built, Sirius would have risen differently, matching the skies of 10,000 BC. The builders were marking a memory of an earlier world, one they themselves did not live to see. Similar monuments appear across continents. The Temple of Mnastra in Malta aligns with the equinox sun, just as ancient Andean sites do. In each, the pattern repeats: stone, star, flood. It is as though the survivors of that lost civilization scattered across the earth, teaching new peoples how to remember the heavens, how to rebuild by the light of old constellations. Modern science has begun to notice strange coincidences. Around the same time, the myths say the flood came, about 12,800 years ago. Evidence shows a sudden global cooling, massive meltwater surges, and impacts from fragments of a comet that struck the northern hemisphere. The Younger Dryas impact theory, though debated, speaks of fire raining from the sky, followed by darkness and rising seas. If such an event occurred, it would have seemed to the people of that time that the heavens themselves had fallen. The stories of stars collapsing, gods descending, and the world drowning could all be memories of that single cosmic catastrophe. When the survivors rebuilt, they looked upward, fearing that one day the stars would again betray them. They built temples that doubled as observatories, tracking the heavens for signs of change. The myths that have reached us of Atlantis, of the flood, of the end of ages, may all be fragments of an ancient science born from that fear. Even now, we still gaze at the same constellations. We call them Orion, Taurus, Leo, The same names the ancients gave. The stars have shifted only slightly in 12 millennia, but their story remains. The flood has become history, and Atlantis has become legend, yet the pattern persists, quietly glowing above us. The sky is the last witness. It has seen the world drown and be reborn. It has watched civilizations rise from sand and fall back into it. If the memory of Atlantis endures anywhere, it is written there, in the stars that mark where the earth once turned and where it will turn again. The search for Atlantis has always been a search for ourselves, a question of what we once were and what we might have lost. For centuries, the legend rested on parchment and myth, but now, in the age of sonar, satellites, and deep sea exploration, the ocean itself is beginning to speak. It is revealing scars and shapes hidden for 12,000 years, traces of cities that once touched the sky and now sleep beneath the waves. The ocean is vast beyond comprehension. More than 70% of our planet lies beneath its surface, yet less than one-fifth of it has been mapped in detail. The rest remains as unknown as another world. Beneath miles of darkness and pressure, mountains taller than Everest rise unseen, and valleys deeper than any canyon cut through the crust of the earth. Somewhere down there, the remains of lost lands wait, fragments of a forgotten geography. In recent years, sonar surveys of the seafloor have revealed strange anomalies. Off the coast of Portugal and Morocco, in the region once described by Plato as beyond the pillars of Heracles, explorers discovered symmetrical patterns beneath the sediment, straight lines, rectangles, and perfect angles stretching across miles. The formations appear artificial, but they lie under thousands of feet of water. Some say they are ancient roads, walls, or foundations. Others insist they are geological formations, illusions of pattern in chaos. But when seen from above, the lines resemble the plan of a city, one built long before the sea claimed it. Farther south, near the Canary Islands, underwater plateaus have been found that once stood above sea level during the Ice Age. Their coastlines bear what appear to be harbors, channels, and terraces carved by human hands. Divers exploring the submerged cliffs have found basalt blocks that fit together too precisely to be natural. Yet, officially, they are still listed as anomalous formations. The ocean keeps its secrets well. In the Caribbean, the mysteries deepen. Off the coast of Cuba, in the Yucatan Channel, a team of researchers using sonar in the early 2000s detected something extraordinary. A vast geometric structure lying nearly 2,000 feet below the surface. The sonar images revealed pyramidal shapes, roads, and large stone-like blocks arranged in grid patterns, stretching for nearly 7 square miles. If man-made, they would be at least 10,000 years old, far older than any known civilization. The data was real, but the site proved too deep for divers to confirm. To this day, the Cuban anomaly remains unexplored, a ghost city glimpsed only by machines. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic Ocean, satellite imagery has captured similar grids beneath the surface west of the Canary Islands. Faint outlines resembling city blocks buried under silt and volcanic ash. Google Earth briefly displayed these patterns before removing them, explaining they were the result of sonar scanning errors. But not everyone was convinced. The lines were too precise, too intentional. To those who believe, they looked like the map of Atlantis itself. The sea hides more than ruins, it hides time. Each layer of sediment that settles on the ocean floor is a page in the planet's memory. And sometimes When that memory is disturbed by shifting currents or seismic movement, pieces of history rise back to light. Fishermen have hauled up worked stone, carved columns, and pottery from depths where no city should exist. In Japan, off the island of Yonaguni, divers discovered what appears to be an underwater pyramid. Terraces, staircases, and walls aligned perfectly with the cardinal directions. The debate rages between geology and archaeology, but the structure's symmetry is undeniable. Some say it was once part of a forgotten land bridge connecting Asia to the Pacific Islands, lost when the seas rose at the end of the Ice Age. Taken together, these sites form a pattern, scattered across the globe, yet united by a single timeline. All of them, every one, sank between 9 and 12,000 years ago, the same period Plato described, the same era when the Earth's ice melted, the climate shifted, and the flood myths began. Coincidence or memory? Science calls it post-glacial transgression. Myth calls it the end of the world. But even science now admits the changes were not gradual. In the Greenland ice cores, a thin layer of platinum and soot marks a moment when something catastrophic struck the Earth, a cosmic impact or explosion that melted ice sheets almost overnight. Rivers of meltwater poured into the oceans, raising sea levels by hundreds of feet. The coastlines of that age, the fertile plains and deltas where people lived, were swallowed, and with them every trace of their cities, their temples, and their names. The flood, it seems, was real. Its scars lie buried beneath the sea, its memory encoded in myth, its evidence scattered across continents. But perhaps the greatest proof of all lies, not in the ruins themselves, but in the precision of the stories. Plato's account, written thousands of years after the event, gives details, geography, architecture, even measurements, that correspond eerily to real places now underwater. He describes a great island beyond the straits, larger than Libya and Asia combined, surrounded by concentric rings of land and sea. He speaks of elephants, of gold, of mountains to the north and plains to the south. The description fits the topography of the submerged Azores Plateau, a vast region of sunken ridges and plains once exposed when sea levels were lower. No one can yet say whether those ridges held cities. But if they did, then somewhere beneath the Atlantic lies the last testament of the world before the flood, the bones of the civilization we call Atlantis. For now, it sleeps, buried under miles of saltwater silence. But technology advances with each year. Autonomous submarines, deep-sea drones, and satellite radar are beginning to peel back the ocean's veil. What they will find in the decades to come may finally answer the question that has haunted humanity for millennia. Was Atlantis only a story, or was it history? Beneath all the maps, beneath every theory and discovery, there lies a truth that does not belong to any one civilization. The story of Atlantis endures because it is the story of humanity itself, the rise, the fall, and the unending desire to rebuild. Every time we look into the sea, we are looking into our own memory, into the reflection of what we once were and what we fear to become again. Plato never meant Atlantis to be just a tale of geography. It was a warning, a message wrapped in myth, written for the world he knew, and, perhaps, for the one we live in now. He spoke of a civilization blessed beyond measure, powerful and advanced, whose pride grew faster than its wisdom. Its people began to see themselves as gods, bending the world to their will, until nature itself turned against them. The flood was not only a punishment, it was a correction. In every culture that remembers a flood, there is the same pattern: human ambition, divine anger, and the cleansing of the world. The Sumerians told of Ziusudra, the man who survived the waters sent by the gods to destroy mankind's arrogance. The Hebrews called him Noah. The Greeks told of Deucalion. The Aztecs spoke of Coxcox. 1,000 names for the same survivor, and 1,000 warnings about the same fate. Atlantis was not unique, it was inevitable. It was the price of forgetting balance. Perhaps that is why its memory was preserved not just as a tragedy, but as a cycle. The Egyptians spoke of the Zeb Tepi the first time, a golden age before the flood, but they also spoke of its return, when the balance between earth and sky would be restored. In their temples, time was not a line, but a circle, endlessly repeating: creation, destruction, renewal. Atlantis, too, may not have been the first. It may have been one of many worlds that rose, shone, and drowned before ours. When we look at the ruins of our own age, the cities that glitter like constellations when seen from orbit, it's easy to imagine that we have broken the cycle. We have conquered the seas, mapped the skies, and built machines that touch the stars. But the truth whispered by the flood myths is simpler and far older. No civilization is too great to fall. The earth forgets easily. It remembers only in layers: sand, stone, and salt. And one day, even our greatest cities may become sediment for another world to uncover. Still, there is something defiant in our remembering. The legends of Atlantis, the temples of Egypt, the carvings at Göbekli Tepe, they are all acts of memory, of resistance against the tide of forgetting. Each stone set by hand, each story passed through generations says the same thing: we were here. They are humanity's way of speaking to the future across the abyss of time. And perhaps that is what the Atlanteans themselves once tried to do: to leave a message before the water came. What if Atlantis was never meant to be found? What if its true legacy is not the ruins beneath the sea, but the idea it left behind, that knowledge once gained must never be lost, that wisdom must outlast disaster, that no flood, no matter how vast, can wash away the human will to begin again? The survivors of the flood rebuilt from nothing. They looked to the stars for guidance, carved their memories into stone, and taught their children to remember. From them came Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, and the Americas. Each, in its own way, was a rebirth of Atlantis. And now, we, the inheritors of their memory, are the latest custodians of the flame. We may not live beside sacred rivers or worship under cigarettes, but we carry the same question: can we build without forgetting what came before? Modern science seeks to prove or disprove the legend, to measure the myth with instruments and data. But perhaps the truth lies not in sonar scans or satellite grids, but in the echo that story leaves behind. Atlantis speaks to something deep within the human mind: the fear of loss, the awe of creation, the need to believe that once, somewhere, humanity achieved harmony with the world, even if only for a moment. The city that sank overnight may not be a place we can visit, but it is a mirror we cannot ignore. It shows us what we might become if we forget that progress without balance leads only to ruin. It reminds us that the same oceans that cradle life can also take it back in an instant. And it warns that the most powerful civilizations are often undone not by enemies, but by their own reflection. Somewhere beneath the waves, under miles of darkness and pressure, the stones of that memory still rest, their shapes softened by time, their carvings erased by the sea. But if we listen, truly listen, we might still hear them. The silence of the deep carries a rhythm, a pulse like a heartbeat. It is the sound of the world remembering. And when we gaze across the water at the endless horizon where the sky meets the sea, we are not just looking outward, we are looking backward into the forgotten dawn of our own story. Atlantis may be gone, but its message endures, carried in every myth, every flood, every rising tide. That nothing built by man lasts forever, but memory does. The city that sank overnight is not lost. It lives in us. In the stones we raise, the skies we map, and the stories we refuse to let die.